We're live. Hello and
Hi.
welcome. Welcome to Soul Star Light Up. I am here today with my dear friend Shuvra Deb. And let me just tell you a little bit about Shuvra. So, Shuvra Deb is helping to normalize and destigmatize society's views on mental health. She would love for all of us to live in a society where engaging with and looking after our own and each other's mental health is the norm. Shuvra has a podcast that arises from her own life changing experience of going through a devastating Category 5 hurricane, Hurricane Irma, in the British Virgin Islands in 2017, which caused her to suffer from post traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Her podcast, Shuvra Deb with You, discusses all issues surrounding mental health, what it means to suffer from a mental illness, to heal from mental illness, and how we can all maintain a good state of mental health on a day to day basis, and so much more. So let's welcome Shuvra Dev. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank
Yay! My
you.
first
Thank you,
guest.
Jess. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm super excited you're here. You are my first guest of this season. The last two episodes I've done by myself, just to kind of reintroduce this because I used to do this before. So I want to tell people a little bit about how you and I met, because when we meet soul family, it just comes out in different ways. So you and I met when we were at Omega Institute, and we were both doing the shamanic Reiki master training course. And that was
hmm
shortly after the hurricane, right? It wasn't that long after. It was like 2019.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you were kind of
About
still
2 years.
getting things together, your life back in order, and all of that stuff.
Mm.
And then we got to spend some time last year together in Washington State at the Whole Rainforest at a retreat. And that's how we got a little bit closer. And I'm
Yeah.
so happy that you agreed to do this today.
Oh, I'm so happy that you invited me onto this. I'm excited.
Me too, me too. So, you have an amazing story. I love you very much. You're an amazing person. But
Oh,
this is exactly part of the reason why I wanted you to come on, because your story is amazing, and what you are doing because of your story is even more amazing. How you're helping others and what you're really trying to do in order to destigmatize mental health, and normalize when people go through things, right? Not just something as tragic as you went through, but just things in life and how it may affect us later on in life. So,
hmm
can you tell us a little bit about your journey, wherever you feel is right to start, from where you were and what's gotten you to where you are now?
Gosh, okay. Um, I think going back, rewinding a bit before the hurricane. So I was a practicing barrister in England and a litigation attorney until very recently, actually. And the mental health work has been running in tandem with all of that for a while now. But around about sort of, I don't know, 8 years ago or so, I sort of started to feel that I wasn't living my purpose anymore. I wasn't feeling satisfied or fulfilled with life, and I couldn't quite work out why. And then around about the same time as when I moved offshore and I went to live in the British Virgin Islands, 14 months after getting there, Hurricane Irma swept through and tore the place to pieces. Along with, I suppose, my mental health, what I thought to be, I considered myself to be somebody who was together, and I use that word in air quotes. Um, and then the hurricane happened, and I suffered from the symptoms of post traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, unbeknownst to myself for about a year. And then I was, by that stage, a year later, 2018, I was living on a different island. The threat of another hurricane came along on the anniversary of Irma, and I kind of lost it. And I just had a bit of a breakdown, went to my GP and begged her to help me. She sent me to a therapist. I got on really well with this therapist, Jennifer Line, and she diagnosed me, treated me, helped me to recover. So I was extremely fortunate because, since then I've done a lot of research into hurricanes, PTSD, other mental health issues, illnesses, and there are many, many, many people, thousands, possibly millions, possibly even billions, given, how many people are in the world, who are suffering from PTSD and they don't know because their symptoms have never been diagnosed. So, things that may seem innocuous to them is actually something that could be a symptom of PTSD. For example, somebody might say to you, "Oh, you're overreacting to a seemingly benign event," but that could be a PTSD symptom because of the hypervigilance that one can experience.
Yeah.
So, knowing what I know now, experiencing what I experienced, and there's still so much more to learn and to know. It's not like, I sort of know everything or anything on anything. Um, I then gradually started to I started to write actually. So my major, to use the American version of, I think I'm getting it right. Tell me if I've got it wrong.
Yes,
But my
yes.
right, but my first degree is in English literature and language. So writing's always been something. Reading and writing and analysing have been things that have just always appealed to me, even from when I was a child. So that then developed into reading English for my degree. And after the hurricane, I started to write quite a lot. What I experienced, kind of like in a diary form, just getting the feelings, the events, the thoughts out onto, paper, or rather onto my laptop.
Mhm.
And all of that was something I was working on while still in practice as a lawyer, living, in various different places all after the hurricane. And I then decided that I wanted to give a TED talk, which I'm yet to do. I haven't quite got there yet. So then I started to write, and I've got, this TED talk sort of, ready to go whenever that opportunity arises. And then from that came an opportunity where I now live in the Cayman Islands to start a radio show. So that started in October of last year. It's now a podcast which I started at the start of this year, January 2023. And in that show, I talk about my mental health experiences. And as you correctly said, Jess, not just to do with big life events. It doesn't have to be a big T trauma for somebody to have mental health issues, to have a mental illness. It can be small T traumas, as we know. It can be, anything. It can be any experience. And, the statistics, 1 in 3 people will or do suffer from mental illness. So it affects so many people. And
Mhm.
I really feel that having gone through the experiences that I've gone through and continue to go through, stuff happens. Life changes happen, and we react to them, and our emotions react to them. I think it's important for people to be able to speak freely and openly to each other, to their friends, to their bosses, to their neighbors, and for people to just acknowledge other people's emotions. We're not robots, it's such a
Right.
thing now that's do, or scroll, scroll,
Mhm.
scroll, scroll if it's, social media. And it feels like the heart from humanity is sort of disappearing in many sectors. And that's something that I want to try and redress the balance on, along with, everybody else doing this kind of work, you being one of those people.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and that is true, and I love the fact that you're doing it. You're doing it in, and I'm starting to do the same thing, but in more global type of way. You're really trying to hit as many people as possible with the podcast and the radio show, because it is a collective trauma that we've all been through recently, the pandemic. As we
Mm,
know now, if you watch any second of the news, you understand that mental health is rampant right now, even with people who never thought that they had a mental illness. But being
yeah.
confined, being scared for your life for whatever long period of time you were during the pandemic has caused a lot of people to have trauma, right? So
Hmm.
tell me about, like, when you noticed that you had PTSD, because you said something
Mm,
very important, where it's like, being this very strong independent woman, you didn't even realize you had post traumatic stress disorder until about a year later, and it sounded like the threat of another hurricane was a trigger. But what did you
mm.
notice when you went to therapy? What were the things that your therapist may have pointed out that were trauma responses that you never realized had been trauma responses?
Yeah, gosh. Okay. So just going back to the pre-therapy, I thought that the way I was thinking, feeling, and acting had become my new norm. So
Mhm.
in the immediate aftermath, I felt that I couldn't relate to other people who hadn't been through the hurricane. I felt almost like there was no point being around people who hadn't been through that experience, because what could I possibly talk to them about? What could they talk to me about? With the exception of a few very, very, very close friends who are, very much there for me immediately afterwards, who hadn't been through that hurricane. With the exception of those people, I kind of felt quite dissociated from other people and from myself. Um, what else? Yeah, the overreactions. Gosh, dreams, constant flashbacks, dreams.
Mhm.
One of the stranger ones actually was so I ended up living in lots of different places and getting on and off planes quite a lot after the hurricane as a result of
Mhm.
living in different places. And I would have these weird moments when I was living on a different island, back towards, my neck of the woods in the UK, just south of the UK, the Channel Islands. I was living down there for a while. And every time I'd leave that particular island to go somewhere else, I'd see the island as like the plane's taking off, and I'd look down because I always want to have the window seat so I can see, what's underneath the planet. I like looking at the planet.
I do too. I do too.
Yeah, window seat. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Forget
I
the
am a
aisle
window
seat.
seat gal, yes.
Right. Middle seat, definitely not.
No.
No. So there I am in the window seat, and I'm looking out the window, and I know that I'm leaving the Channel Islands, but in my mind, I'm seeing the BVI, and I'm seeing it as if it's actually happening. And it's
Yeah.
moments like that that I genuinely thought I was going mad. I literally thought I was going mad because I know the reality of where I am, yet in my head I'm seeing something else. So all these sort of like, and I sort of laugh about it now because it's kind of quite funny to me that that's what was happening.
Yeah.
But of course, it's not funny at all. It's a sign. Sorry, my cat's biting the lead on my laptop. It's it was a symptom of the PTSD.
That's right.
Um, and so then, as you said, the next hurricane, fast forward a year later, living on a different island again, and another back towards this side of the world now, obviously, for there to be hurricanes. And it's coming through on the anniversary. And I just completely just couldn't stop crying. It was just such a dramatic reaction, even though I'd managed to get myself tickets for me and for the cats to get off to New York because I was in
Mhm.
Bermuda, and the next easy place to go off to is New York, because there were like 5 flights a day or something at the time. There might still be again after the pandemic, I don't know. Even though I had all that in place in situ, I was still panicked,
Yeah.
like completely panicked. And that's when I knew, well, I didn't know what else to do actually.
Mhm.
I actually didn't know. I say that's when I knew that I had to do something. If anything, it was the opposite. I didn't know what else to do. And I thought, I come from a long line of doctors, and perhaps it was my upbringing. It's like, when you don't know what else to do, go to the doctor.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
actually there's actually something in that, because, on a more serious note, and I say this on my show, that if somebody is feeling really awful, they're feeling suicidal, go to the hospital. Just
That's right.
go to the hospital. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. That is
Yeah.
yeah, if you don't know what else to do, yeah, see a doctor, go to, because there'll be some clarity there,
Hmm.
or call someone. There are, here in the United States, there are numbers that people can call. If you're
Sure.
feeling suicidal, there's a number. If you're feeling like you don't have any resources, there are numbers that, and resources where people can reach
Yeah.
out. So
Yeah.
um so going from being a I want to say it like you say it, but I can never get your accent right. Barrister. Barrister.
Is that how I say it? Sounds so pretentious. I'm sorry, America, on
An
behalf of my
attorney,
entire
okay? I'll
nation.
say it the American way. Being an attorney,
There we go, attorney.
coming from a long line of doctors and deflecting from that and becoming an attorney,
Yeah.
and then just getting to a point where it just wasn't working for you anymore.
Mm.
People say, "Oh my God, well, you had it made. You were an attorney, a successful law firm, all these things." But what got you to the point where you were just like, yeah, I mean, you mentioned not living your life purpose, and I just want you to
Mm.
talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's funny. People do say that. Some people, some lawyer friends of mine actually have said, "What are you doing? You're throwing your life away." All this education, all this training, all this talent, all this, and what they perceive.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd never considered myself to be a particularly talented lawyer. I mean, I've had my moments. Obviously, we all have our moments of greatness, and then we probably have more moments of mediocrity. But that's life, isn't it?
That's right.
um, many moments of mediocrity, punctuated by a handful of moments of greatness, perhaps. But I think the same could be true of most people. So therefore, I didn't really consider myself, and I still don't consider myself to have been this particularly successful barrister, attorney, lawyer. Um, I think it's when, as I said before, I just didn't feel the purpose anymore. I'd get up in the morning and rather than feeling passionate about my day, I started looking forward to Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
And that went on for long enough. It went on for years, in fact. And
Mm-hmm.
that's no way to live. And also, I turned 40 last year, and I take the view that we live our lives in 20-year stages. 0 to 20, we're working out how to walk and eat and talk and basic level education. 20 to
Right.
40, we're building something, we're learning about the world, we're learning about ourselves. 40 to 60, we're solidifying what we've learned in the previous 40 years and we're building something bigger. And then
Mm-hmm.
60 to 80, we thrive off that. And then 80 to 100, I guess we'll find out. I haven't quite worked
Yeah.
that 20-year period out yet. It's far away for
Right.
me. So, right.
Yeah, but I do.
So,
I see that with a lot of people, especially women. Yeah, I do a
mhm,
lot of work with women, and I see women get to a point 39, 38, 39, 40, and it's just like, okay, it's time to do something more meaningful,
yeah,
more of service and more of kind of a self-love thing too, more than anything else, where it's like, if I don't love doing this, why am I doing it?
yeah, yeah. And I feel that I
Yeah.
do have certain talents. I am, quite good at expressing myself. I do have a voice that generally carries quite well. I can project. I'm constantly being told that I'm the loudest person in the room. I'm sure you would agree with that.
I'm used to it now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. After you meet me, you sort of like love it or hate it, and then just get used to it.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, writing as well. Creating pieces of work that can transmute into a podcast or a blog post or a poem or some form of prose. That's always been
Mhm.
something. And it's what you said, actually, being of service. So being in law, my the sort of, I guess, biggest motivation for going into that was to be of service, to help people, but also to do it in a
Mhm.
way that I found interesting, which I did for a
That's right.
while. It went sort of reasonably well for about 20 years until I stopped finding it interesting and I
Mhm.
stopped feeling like I was being of service in a way that was meaningful to me.
Right.
That's no criticism of law or lawyers. Many of my very good friends are lawyers. I've met them
Mhm.
through the law, and they enjoy what they do and they derive purpose from it. But for me, that changed, and so I felt that I would be of better service. I feel I am being of better service doing the podcast, the radio show, from which I'm also starting to forge a speaking and coaching career. So
Mhm.
that's where it's all headed, and I'm extremely excited about that. Very
That's
excited.
wonderful. So, where did the idea for the radio show podcast come from? Like, I mean, how did that come about?
So the TED Talk, I think, is where it really started.
Mhm.
I spent, I'm embarrassed to say, I'd spent years writing this talk. It was supposed to be 18 minutes and it ended up being like 4 hours or something. Nobody wants to hear me drone on for 4 hours, anyone. Um, so that's where that's where the material
Mhm.
started from, I guess,
Mhm.
but just the very hurricane-based material. Um, I then had a chance meeting with the person who runs most of the radio stations where I live here in the Cayman Islands. We got talking, and he suggested I come and have a coffee with him, and we spoke some more, and that's how it started.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
It's
great. I love
following the
those chance
breadcrumbs and the
meetings.
right. It's the synchronicities that start to happen when you really start to say and focus in on, people are always looking for this grandiose life purpose, right? I mean, not to say that this doesn't have the potential to be something grandiose, because it does. I mean, a radio show, a podcast can get very big and have a very wide audience, and that's what I'm hoping and praying for your podcast, because it's super
Thank
important,
you.
the things that you talk
Thank
about.
you.
Um, but sometimes it just starts with that, right? That chance meeting or that writing that you started with, and sometimes you just have to do it and not even know why you're doing it, but that it feels good
Yes.
and that it's something that maybe later on, right? So we have to be able to let our soul lead us into what is right, and what feels right. You started writing this TED Talk with this idea and just did it. Like you didn't know how it was
Mm.
going to happen. You didn't know, and it will happen. I'm pretty sure you'll get a TED Talk, but you just started with the big goal, and started small, and now you're at this middle ground that can really get you to, I mean, and maybe the TED Talk isn't the goal anymore. Maybe the goal now is just this podcast, which is super helpful and educational for people, and growing that, or the coaching and the speaking engagements and all of
Mm.
that stuff that's going to develop and continue to develop. So um I want people to hear that and understand that even when you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, just do it,
Yeah.
because it eventually is going to lead to something.
Yeah, the whole follow your heart thing. That's just
Mhm.
so important.
Mhm.
Follow your heart and then work hard at it. It's not a case
Yeah,
of, woo-woo spirituality. Let's all sit here, say
that's right.
Om, cross-legged, and, follow our hearts. It's
Mm-mm.
more than that. It's finding something that is meaningful and
That's
then
right.
working hard to get there. Getting up at 5 a.m., doing 2 hours work before you hit the gym. That's how
That's
these
right.
things get done.
Right. Right. It's not just, like you said, not just sitting there and meditating and trying to manifest it without putting the work into it. You have to, if
Yes.
you get an idea, then try it and do it and put it out there
Yes.
and see what happens. And if you're leading from that heart space, like you say, then
Yeah.
things will develop.
Yeah, that's so true. So my friend Mary Dalber, she's up in Boston. She says this thing where, her friends will be saying to her, she's a card reader, she does astrology, um, psychic, medium. Her friends will say to her, oh, but, I'm manifesting the dude, the boyfriend's going to come, I'm manifesting him. And then Mary will say, okay, what are you doing? Well, I'm visualizing him. I've got a vision board and, I've got a list of everything that he's got to have and be and do. And then she says, okay, and
That's
nothing.
right.
And are you getting out there? Are you going on
Right.
dates? Are you on any dating apps? What else are you doing?
Mhm.
And if the answer to that is a period of quiet silence, then just visualizing and writing lists is not going to be enough. It's certainly a start for sure.
Yeah.
Put it out to the
Yeah.
universe, ask God, pray, but then
Hmm.
we have our part too, and we've got to
That's right.
actively participate in our lives.
Very correct. You have to put the action steps in to match the energy that you're putting out.
Hmm. And if that means having a plan, have a plan. If it's a weekly plan,
Hmm.
get your week into
Hmm.
grids. I mean, I love plans and lists and things like that, as you can probably tell. And I used to do this as a student. So revising
Yeah.
for exams, I'd work out what free time I had in between lectures and seminars and, eating and socializing and how many hours of work I needed to do in order to get to the end work product. And then I'd divide
Hmm.
the time up. So, this day, let's take Monday, I've got, 8 or 10 working hours or 14 if I'm really going for it.
Hmm.
Divide up the hours. I'm going to work on this particular essay for these particular hours and then that one, and then I'm going to read around this one and then that one. And you can't always stick rigidly to the plan, but if it's
Yeah.
there, then you're much more likely to stick to it because it's already manifest. You've already manifested it by putting it onto paper and you've already
Hmm.
committed yourself to it. And if we
Yeah.
can't, this is another thing, if we can't keep the promises that we've made to ourselves, then how can we possibly show up for anyone else and keep promises to them, right?
That's right. That's exactly, and I love that you said that, because that's where it starts. It starts with yourself first, and I say this to
Yeah.
clients all the time. I talk about self love, and that's a big term, and it's a, whatever, a trendy term or whatever it is, but it's the language that we have, and it's true. You have to give and do for yourself in order to be able to have enough bandwidth to be able to give and do for others.
Hmm.
It does. It starts here, within you. So yeah, yeah. Thank you for saying that. So tell me more about the podcast.
Gosh, what would you like to know?
Well, it's called Shuvra Deb, right?
With you. Yeah, the idea
With
is that
you.
I'm with the listeners. Somebody
Mhm.
didn't get that, and I thought, oh my gosh, did I pick a name that's, you know, incomprehensible or something? Maybe I did. I don't know. Maybe I have to change the name of
If
it.
it was only one person, I think you're good. I think you're fine, because I totally got it when you,
Oh,
when you
good. I'm
said
glad
that.
you
So
did.
yeah.
I just sometimes think, people are being polite and, they just don't want to offend me or something. Um,
Yeah.
but no, so it's about, raising mental health awareness and inviting people to participate in their own mental health care. And
Mhm.
the topics are quite varied. So the first one really addresses the journey, I think it's called Hurricane to Healing. So it addresses the journey of how the hurricane affected me and what I then kind of went about and did about it with help from professionals.
Mhm.
And then the second one's called Standing Still to Move Forward. And those are the only, oh no, I remember what the first three are called. And after that, I can't remember what they're called. And that's
So you
about
guys got to check
stress
it out, and
management.
she'll tell you where to check it out in a minute. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Go and check it out and tell me what they're called.
yes.
Yeah, Standing Still to Move Forward. So that's about stress management and how, in spite of no matter how busy we all are with our lives, our families, our childcare responsibilities, we do owe that duty to ourselves to not be stressed, to de-stress, to show
Mhm.
up for ourselves and for the other people that we care about, and to turn up to our place of employment and give it our best shot by not being in a place of stress and anxiety, as much as we can.
That's right.
And then the third one, another example of the sort of topics I talk about is finding your true life purpose. So I take a lot of the stuff that I talk about, I take from other people. So it's not me saying it for the first time. And
Mhm.
so a lot of the stuff that Deepak Chopra talks about, I talk about in that third show of the
Mhm.
podcast. One of the other shows earlier this year, I think it was in January, there was some quite concerning statistics that came out locally here in Cayman about the mental health situation, which was that in 2021, the attempted suicide rate had gone up by 72%.
Mhm.
And that was
Mm.
here on our tiny island of
Wow.
71,000 people.
Yeah.
And that, is a very, very big concern. And then that got me looking into similar statistics elsewhere in the States, in the UK, Australia, Canada. And alarmingly, the numbers have gone up everywhere, according to the
Mhm.
stats.
Mhm.
And so just talking about that and again, inviting people to, be okay with saying that they're not okay, to show up to the doctor, to go and see a therapist, whether that's online, in person, to reach out to a friend.
Right.
Another thing I have that I've talked about is getting yourself a mental health check-in buddy. So the
Mm.
idea of that is that a close friend or relative or a mentor, somebody you trust who trusts you, somebody you care about who cares about you, if you're going through a hard time, you buddy up. It's a bit like having a mentor mentee system at university or at school. You buddy up with your mental
Mhm.
health check-in buddy, and you let them know when you're having a hard time because you've lost your job or you're going through a
That's right.
breakup, or it doesn't have to be a natural disaster. It could be the end of a
Mhm.
relationship, which can be just as devastating, right?
Yeah. That's right.
Or loss of a job. You've got all these commitments, and then suddenly
Mhm.
you don't know how you're going to pay the bills.
Yeah.
Huge, huge life change. So,
That's right.
going through things like that, or even just if you're feeling down, if
Mhm.
somebody does have depression or anxiety and they are experiencing symptoms and they're having a bad time of it, then tell your mental health check-in buddy. And the idea is that the buddy sends a text at least once a day, first thing in the morning, hey, how are you? A question. So that question requires a response.
Mhm.
How did whatever it was that that's going on in their life go for you? How was the gym this morning? Whatever it is they're doing, what are you having for breakfast? Just, benign questions, but something
Right.
that is a point of contact and tells the person who's going through a hard time that, I matter. Someone cares about me. Somebody is bothered that I'm eating breakfast and what I'm having for my breakfast. And
Mhm.
it's those small things that really add up. It's always the details, isn't it? It's always, I find, the small details that make the difference.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
And
so
that's that I love that. I mean, I love that piece of it because it is so important. Most of the time when people are suffering, they don't want to suffer alone. They think that they do. There's a part of them that wants to suffer alone because they don't want to be a burden on anyone.
mm,
But to be able to say, it takes a lot of courage to say, "Hey, I need a check-in buddy. Can you please be my check-in buddy?" And this is what I need from you. Being able to
yeah,
say, I need you to call me. I need you to check in on me. If I don't
yeah,
answer, please come and knock on my door, whatever it is.
exactly,
It's
exactly.
important. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it works both ways. So when your check-in buddy needs you, you're there for them.
Mhm. That's right.
And you can
That's
even
right.
set up a system, amongst a group of university students, for example. They could set up some kind of, I don't know, system where they're paired with whomever, and if somebody's away or they're unavailable, then there's a different person that they're paired with, and it works in a
That's
group in that way, so that there's
right.
always someone there for someone else.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
I love that. It's super important, to be able
Yeah.
to have that. Because not everybody's ready to go to therapy. Not everybody is, therapy is not an easy thing to do. People are just like,
Mm-mm.
often people are just like, well, you should just go to therapy. And it's like, it's, it's not easy for someone to say, number one, accept help, and number two, say that they need help, because we're so used to in our society saying, nope, I got this, I'm good, I'm strong, I can, or
Oh
you
my
may
gosh,
be
yes.
perceived as a strong person, so people assume that you don't need help, and then for
Yes.
you to say it, it's it is a very ego driven thing, but we a lot of the times we live in that ego driven space, so it's very hard for us to be vulnerable,
Yeah.
and that takes
I think two,
vulnerability.
yeah, absolutely. I think two things arise from that. Firstly, and this is just, it's popped into my head now, and I haven't actually thought about this until now. Exactly as you say, hard to go to therapy and say you're not
Mm,
okay, because articulating what someone's feeling, most of the time we probably don't know what we're feeling. We know we're feeling sad, we know we're feeling
mhm,
angry, we know we're feeling off, but what does
yeah,
that actually mean, and what do we think is causing it? We need to be able to deploy language to
that's right.
communicate with the talking therapist, given that it's
Mhm,
about
mhm.
talking.
Yeah,
And a lot of people might not have the tools to have that level of language to be able to communicate, to know what the words are that they need to
that's
express,
right.
to get the therapist to understand, so that the therapist can help them in the right way. So the start has to be, if they feel strong enough to do it. Because again, it takes a great deal of vulnerability and therefore courage to actually
Mhm.
be strong enough to get up off the couch that you've been sitting and crying on for days, walk
Yeah.
out the door, or even
Mm.
go online
Yeah.
and get that
Yeah.
therapist.
Yeah.
So that's a huge
Exactly.
deal. And the other point that you raise is that we do live in a society where "how are you" is the expected response is "I'm fine" or "I'm
Mm.
good" or "I'm great" or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's clearly a facade. If you're
Yeah.
fine, if somebody says to me, "I'm fine," I worry about them, because I'm
Mhm.
like, why are you just fine? What are you not
Yes.
telling me? Why are you not great or good or happy or joyful or
Yeah.
productive? Why are you just
Mhm.
fine?
It's true.
So
It's
yeah,
true.
yeah, we need to be able to use other words, other adjectives than fine to express how we
Yeah.
are when somebody asks us, I think.
Yeah. And at the least, what therapy can do is help define that vocabulary for people, because being a therapist, I know that a lot of people are scared to go to therapy because they're scared of what they're going to find, these
Yes.
little monsters that they're scared of. And I say monsters in quotes because there are no monsters, but people think that
Mm,
there's so much
mm.
bad within them, or they don't want to relive the bad that has occurred in their life or is occurring in their life, or face it, because we spend so much time numbing ourselves as a society as well, whether
Yes.
it's through, you know, illicit drugs, or,
Alcohol,
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 or
yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
or, prescription medication, because oftentimes people just say, just give, they're more willing
yeah,
to get a pill than to actually talk
yes,
to a therapist. So if at the least people can do is go to therapy to gain a vocabulary of feelings, that would be super important, just to take that
yeah,
very first step.
yeah. I think the analogy that I would use there, the whole being scared to confront ourselves, and I
Hmm.
have been just as guilty of this, and I'll come back to that in a minute, but the analogy is this, isn't it? That you've got something you need to do for work, let's say,
Hmm.
or there's a costume you need to make for your kids' book day. I hear that National Book Day or International Book Day or something is a thing, and parents are expected to dress their children up as book characters or books or something. And that's a lot of pressure.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
that's looming. You've got to do that, or you've got to get a project done for work, or you've got to, set the agenda for a meeting, whatever it is. And we put it off and we put it off and we put it off. And this monster builds in our head about how scary this thing is going to be, how difficult it's going to be, when 99.9% of the time, by the time we've started the project, the book day costume, and we've done it, it's nowhere near as bad as we imagined it would be. And I
That's
think
right.
similarly with not wanting to confront the so-called bad, and of course it's not bad, it's just, it's people are complex. It's
Yeah,
what it's what we are.
that's
Um,
right.
the whole being, the good, the bad, everything in between.
Hmm.
Um, Again, it's easy to think, oh gosh, I can't confront that because it's going to hurt too much. It's going to bring up too many memories, or I won't be able to deal with it.
Hmm.
And sure, it might be that the person's gone to the wrong type of therapy, or they don't resonate with the therapist they're seeing. But that doesn't mean that what they're feeling can't be dealt with. And
Right.
whatever illness they might have, whilst it might not be cured, doesn't mean that it can't be managed with the right treatment and resonating with the right therapist, healer, doctor, whatever word you want to use.
Hmm.
And so, again, I think by stepping over the threshold and into that healing situation in the same way of, picking up the scissors and the paper mache and whatever it might be to make the book for costume day, start the process.
That's
Just,
right.
take that tiny step towards starting the process. And then if you meet the right person, they will be there to hold your hand and help you
That's
through and
right.
guide you through.
That's right. And I always say don't be afraid to ask therapists questions, right? Like you have to find the right match. Like I know for me as a
Mm,
therapist, there has to be a connection there in order
yeah.
for work to be done, for the work to be done. Because if you're not feeling connected to a person that you have to be vulnerable in front of, you're not going to be honest and truthful. I always tell people a therapist is only as good as the client allows them to be by the information that they give them,
Yes.
because, I've had people that I've had clients where I know they're just pretty much BSing me. They're just very much on the surface, very much whatever.
Yeah.
And when you try to push, they're like, no, we're not doing this, and that's
Mm,
okay because they're not ready. But
mm,
allow yourself to ask a therapist before you start working them questions that you think are important.
yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. And if a therapist has a problem with that, then maybe that's not the therapist for you. I'm not
Correct.
saying
Correct.
interrogate the therapist and like put them through this, whole job interview process. But if there are things that you are concerned about in therapy, ask the question and see how
Yeah.
they respond. And if the response feels good, then maybe that's the person for you.
Yeah.
You would, do that with, I don't know, anybody that you're going to hire to come and work in your house. You're going to ask them
Well,
questions,
this is
or
it. Yeah.
right,
If you're paying
you're
someone
hiring
money,
someone to work in your house, the head and the heart of your house,
gosh,
of your
yeah.
body. So
Yeah.
it's important for it to be a good match.
Yeah. I agree. And I had a similar situation. So I have an online therapist and I got matched with somebody that I just didn't resonate with and very
Mhm.
politely said, I'm not going to continue, sought somebody else, asked them a few questions, resonated, and boom,
Yeah,
went for
that's
it.
right.
And it's a good experience.
Yeah, there's someone out there for everybody, and you have to
Yeah.
find the right person for you that you're going to feel comfortable with. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Hmm.
Awesome. I love this. So is there anything else you want to share? Oh, actually, tell us where
Mm.
we can find your podcasts.
Okay, of course. Yeah. So Spotify, Apple, Google, and other platforms. Shuvra Deb with you. Just do go into the search facility and it will pop up. And you'll see me
Yep.
smiling wearing an orange top.
Can't
It's quite bright. You can't miss me.
miss that face and
That
that
wasn't even
smile.
deliberate. That wasn't even deliberate. It was just, what do I wear for this photo shoot? I didn't even know why I was doing the photo shoot. I just thought that again, my intuition just guided me to do a photo shoot. Again, I'm not even sure I knew. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
See, sometimes
I was like, oh, I'll wear this
come,
orange
right?
top. Yeah. And that's just become my sort of brand color because
Yeah.
I was just happened to be wearing that top for the photo that
Well,
I
orange
ended up
looks great on
liking.
you anyway. So
Thank you, my love.
it's definitely a good color on you. So, okay, good. So, anywhere where podcast stream, look for Shuvra
Yeah.
Deb with you.
Hmm.
Listen to it. How often do the episodes come out?
Weekly. So weekly, every
Week.
Tuesday morning, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm excited for to see it grow and for it to continue
Thank you.
the episodes coming and all the information and all the love that you put behind it. So I'm going
Mm.
to ask you three questions that I ask all of my guests, even though you're my first one this year. In the past I've asked. So the first question is, what lights you up?
Oh, I like that with the name of your show as well.
You like that, huh?
I do. I like that. You see, I picked up on that. What lights me up? Gosh, I would have to say the smiles of the people that I love and care about.
Mhm.
So if I see, or when I see somebody, that I'm close to, or even a stranger actually, and they're talking about something, or someone's cracked a joke and their face just lights up and they just smile and they laugh, that totally lights me up. It gets me going as well. So
Mhm.
everyone's laughing.
I love that. I love that. Okay, and the next question is, what would you tell little Shuvra, your younger self, knowing what you know today?
Oh gosh, that's an interesting one because I think had we had this conversation even a week or two ago, my answer would have been different.
Hmm.
But I had an Akashic Records reading recently, and as a result of what came up in that and what I'm currently working through, I would tell little Shuvra that it's okay to be sad and you don't have to hide the sadness with anger.
I love that. That's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, a nice breath with that one. So true, right? Yeah, that's right.
And it's unintentional. The hiding sadness with anger is unintentional. It's a cover.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're taught, right? I mean, we're taught to hide our deepest emotions because they're not acceptable in society with the ones that
Yeah,
are acceptable, which are usually anger
yeah,
or whatever. Anger is
yeah,
like most accepted in our society
yeah.
for some strange reason, which is the most damaging. But that's the
Well, it's
one
the
that's
most divisive, isn't it? It keeps
right.
people divided and,
That's right.
divide and conquer and all of that. But then even with that, oh, be angry, express your anger, but don't get too angry.
Right.
Yeah.
You're a young lady. You cannot be too angry. That is not like a young. Yeah,
It's not
exactly. All
ladylike. Yeah.
mixed messages. It's like
Uh-huh.
you can't be sad, you can be angry, but not too angry.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. You can be tall, but not too tall.
Right. You
You
can
can
be
be
sexy, but
clever,
not
but
too
not too
sexy.
clever. Yeah, make sure your skirt's not too short, but make sure you look
Right.
pretty for the boys.
Right. All of that.
Oh
All
gosh,
of
we could
that.
go on with this for
We
like
can go
a
on forever
week.
with that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and then my very last question is,
Mm,
what advice, knowing what you're doing now, right? This is
mhm,
definitely to hit all generations. Your podcast
mm,
is for no age. There's no
mm,
age restriction for your podcast. But what
mhm.
advice do you have for the younger generation?
For the younger generation and for every generation, for every person, is believe in yourself. Don't
Hmm.
let what other people say or what you deem to be other people's judgments stop you from being authentic, true to yourself, and believing in yourself and going for it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Live an
Yeah.
authentic life because we'll get to the end of it, which is actually quite soon for even someone that's born this minute. We don't have that long.
Mhm.
We don't want to
Right.
get to the end of it and have regrets and wish we hadn't let other people's views of us dictate how we behave,
That's
think,
right.
and feel.
That's right. And it's so good to give that message to everyone. But if
Hmm.
we can get that, hammer that into to younger people so that they don't, but everybody has to live their experience. But if we can
Yeah,
plant that seed to say, it's okay to have your own opinion and don't let others influence you. It's okay to make your own decisions, even if it
yeah,
doesn't seem right to other people.
yeah.
Follow what feels right to you. So I love
By
that.
all means, be guided by people, take advice, and
Yes, of
don't take
course, because
advice if it
people
doesn't
have
resonate.
lived, right?
Right,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah. Listen to some
Yeah.
of the wisdom that, parents, teachers, mentors, older people might have, but
Hmm. Hmm.
with all of that, be authentic.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's knowledge. That's information and knowledge for you to be able to make the most informed decision for yourself. So,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
Hmm.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you and your time being
Hmm.
here as my very first guest for 2023. I so appreciate you. So,
Thank
everybody, check out
you.
her podcast on all podcast streaming apps, I guess. I don't know,
Yeah,
technology
platforms, apps, yeah.
platforms, apps.
Yeah. Well, thank
And
you
that's
so much.
Shuvra
Thank
Deb
you.
with you. Okay, so check
Yes.
her out. Thank you, thank you. And
Thank
I
you.
hope
Thank you. Thank you for having
I know
me.
I'm
And
I'm
as your
missing
first
you.
guest of the year.
Yes, I'm very honored to have you as my first guest, and I'll be missing
Yeah.
you when you're coming here to the U.S. But maybe I can make it up
I
to you
know,
sometime.
I know. I'm so happy to be going back to the US. I haven't been
Mhm.
since December, so it'd be
Yeah,
nice to be back and see some new places. I'm going to places I haven't been to yet. So
yes.
watch out, America. I'm on my
I'm
way. I'll be
excited
there
for
next
you
week.
because if it's gonna be as glorious as it was when you went to Super Walmart, then yeah, I'm gonna be very
Oh my
excited.
gosh. Shall I wear my USA ears with the
Yes,
sparkles?
yes, I think you bring them with
I
you.
might
They will
actually
be
wear
very much
them.
appreciated in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, they will. I think they'll love me.
That's
They might
right.
even give me a free tour of the White House
I
without an
think they might.
application just for wearing the ears. I
Thank
can
you
try.
so much.
Thank you, my love.
All right.
Lots of love.
Bye.
Bye.